Hillary has been lengthening her excuses as to why she lost the election. She didn't really lose the election. It was stolen from her by, I think it's up to 24 different excuses she has now. Number 24 is content farms in Macedonia. And as I said, my grandfather was a Macedonian content farmer, and we often think about, gathering on the porch and recalling the old days on the Macedonian. He never thought that the old content farmers he left behind in Macedonia would one day steal the U.S. presidential election. They are gnarled, hard-working Macedonian peasants, and the way they were able to reach out and steal the election from a well-oiled machine headed by John Punditry.
Do you think people have missed us since we haven't done a podcast in 2 weeks? You think people think we've been silenced?
Yeah, I guess a bunch of them were actually happy to see us gone. I think we are gone.
Well, if they were happy for that, then we're going to have to disappoint them.
Yeah.
Because we're back.
Yep, not getting rid of us that easily.
Yeah, let's do a podcast here.
Yep, let me turn on the podcast machine.
Yeah,
the levers, the cranks.
All right.
Gonna count down.
Ready?
Yep.
Yeah. 3, 2, 1. Macedonian President Stevo Pendarovski got himself into trouble when he told young people in Novi Sad that if he was not the president of Macedonia, he'd move out of the country. What an outstanding example for the president of Macedonia. He later backpedaled, of course. Meanwhile, the crown jewel of outgoing Prime Minister Zoran Zaev's government, the former and now disgraced Special Prosecutor Katica Janeva, was transferred to house arrest in the home of her son and possible accomplice, Lazar, as she awaits trial beginning on December the 3rd. And while Macedonians await the beginning of that trial, questions are now being raised about the bonus payments that Janeva and other special prosecutors received from the so-called, quote, special treasury, unquote, within the special prosecutor's office, amounting to hundreds of thousands of euros. We'll discuss all of this and more in this episode of the Macedonian Content Farmers Podcast. I'm Jason Miko, coming to you from the foot of the Catalina Mountains in Oro Valley, Arizona.
And this is Cvetin calling in from Skopje, Macedonia, but as obedient subject to President Pendarovski, I am looking for relocation. If anybody needs a journalist.
What in the hell was he thinking?
Yes.
I mean,
my God.
And I saw Antonio Miloshovsky put out a tweet or a statement, talking about how, President Gligorov, President Trajkovsky, even President Crvenkovski would never ever have said anything like that during much more difficult circumstances.
Yeah.
And here Macedonia is on the cusp of NATO membership, something that Stevo Pendarovski and the outgoing Prime Minister Zoran Zaev, have managed to push through because of the name change and everything else. And yet, the economic indicators are not horrible. This is not Africa. This is not Pakistan or someplace like that. And yet he's telling young people to leave.
Abandon ship.
Abandon ship. Yeah. What is so? His quote apparently is, this is various media reports said, quote, this is Stevo Pendarovski saying, "You have only one life to live. We all do, and nobody is crazy to spend his life while the U.S. session talks last for years, and the average wage in my country is 400 euros. If I weren't president, I would move out of my country."
Yeah.
What an example. And now, obviously, there's been a lot of blowback. Talk about that.
Yeah, this is especially horrible and hideous because Zaev and Pendarovski were making this promise during the Colored Revolution, during the elections, pre-election campaign in 2016, that not only they will stop people moving out of the country, they will bring them back in this horrible soap opera style, which Zaev has embraced. Like, I speak to this mother and she tells me, I ache because my child has gone to England and I want him to come back and have grandsons with him. And I said, we will bring him back. I tell you, we'll bring him back. And I had serious conversations with people. I remember interviewing the Soros lady in Belgrade, Sonia Licht, and we were discussing how none of what the stuff her organization is promising in Macedonia will happen, and is even helpful for the country if it happens. And she would go like, but why do you don't want to see the young people come back from abroad? Don't you want to have your the young Macedonians, the best and the brightest, come back to the country? And it was a horrible, almost psychopathic promise they were making. Like, you need to be a clinical case to say something like this to people, because people were moving out non-stop. My family have had, great-grandfathers go work in Alexandria. My father had worked in Libya. I mean, this has always been what we've done. People would go to Romania on top of the usual places like Australia, the United States, Germany, Switzerland. And, it's a hugely immigrant country. And there's no reversing this. I mean, Gruevski's idea was to stanch the flow by keeping blue-collar workers in Macedonia, by bringing German companies to open up car parts manufacturing plants in the country. And he also made Macedonia a home for the Macedonians, where you can feel like you belong with all the troubles, the polluted air, the relatively low salary, etc. At least it's your home. You can be proud of what you are. And now Zaev has undercut this additional element of, it's very difficult to feel that Macedonia is your own country under Zaev. The economics haven't improved. And they have literally, this is the latest of the crazy promises they made during the Colored Revolution, like lying that Vamera had killed this journalist, or organized this Islamist attack, or organized the Kumanov attack, or were wiretapping themselves, etc. And this is the latest shoe to drop, literally, because as part of the Colored Revolution, they staged this sappy protest by leaving shoes from people who have moved out of the country in front of the government.
I remember that was in front of the government. They put all those shoes, right?
Yeah. And this was like Gruevski expelled all these bright, young, critical people because he can't stand criticism and can't provide a good economy for them. And he's at fault. They left, and we bring him their shoes. Like, get out of here.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I'm not going to name names, but I have a number of friends in Macedonia that have actually come back to Macedonia. So American Macedonians that have, you came back, yeah, and of course, yeah, you were in the States for a couple of years, but I know whole families that have come back, individuals and others. I know that, and again, I'm not going to name names. I want to call attention to them, but my point being that they saw that there is opportunity of one type or another in Macedonia. Despite the pollution, of course, they saw that there's a quality of life. I know some of them live outside of Skopje. In particular, I'm thinking of Prespa, Bitula, and near just outside of Kavadarci. So people are coming back, have come back, will come back, and it is not all doom and gloom. But for the president of the country to say, if I wasn't president, I'd leave. That is just the worst example. And to your point that this was one of the promises of the Zaev government and the so-called colorful revolutionaries that put them in power, put the colorful revolutionaries in various positions of power in the government, and then everybody would come back. And it's just, it goes to show you, I think, the hypocrisy of this government.
Yeah, and the best part is that, you see Pendarovski as he's saying this. He's twitching, he's touching himself, he's waving his hands weirdly, standing up, sitting down. He's a nervous wreck. He has always been one. We've all known this. He's not fit for the position and mentally, and he still considers himself as a think tanker. He likes to talk as a professor, even though he was just for a brief while, and this was like a made-up post for him. But he likes to explain, to say controversial stuff, to say how smart he is, and it's happened a bunch of times since he was elected president. And most notably, he told the Wall Street Journal at one point that if we're not allowed to open accession talks, then our people will leave. He hinted at migrants, that we will open the borders for migrants. And he said some of our own people who will go will be criminals. So the usual Greek threat to Europe or Turkish at this point, that will flood you with Islamists and criminals. Pendarovski made this statement as well. He is not a serious person for this job. He cannot. This is the best SDSM could do, and it's not very good, to tell you the truth.
Right. Yeah, no, actually, I remember I was watching an interview with him with one of the French TV stations a week or two ago, and just from a public relations standpoint, he just is not a very good interviewee. He is fidgety, he's looking off, he's doing anything but looking at his interviewer. It's just weird, and maybe, you know, I know the Prime Minister has hundreds of public relations advisors. Maybe he should lend some of them over to Pendarovski and help him out there a little bit. But yeah, just a really bad example. I don't know how we saw some of the blowback that he got from that. I don't know if that's going to continue. And then of course the Minister for the Diaspora, Edmund Ademi, he said in another TV interview, he said, quote, anybody
speaking of people who are unwell and in the government.
Yeah, true. He said, quote, anybody who tells you he will stop the immigration is lying. Also, anybody who tells you who will bring those who left back home is lying. And this media piece said that Ademi said that while laughing.
He was laughing. He was literally smirking. Wow. Whoever tells you they're gonna come back, he's lying. And this was Zaev. He works for Zaev, who literally said this. They're laughing in the face of their supporters. It's beautiful.
Oh wow. Well, we got elections coming up that will determine that. But let's before we talk about elections and things like that. So the ongoing rackets. We've got Racket 1, Racket 2. I don't know, Racket 3, Racket 2, which is Dan Donchev and the health minister.
Benko Filic.
Yeah, thank you. That one seems to have. I don't see a lot of news, but with Katica Yaneva, so she's been moved from detention in the prison to house arrest in her son's apartment. Now the word on the word in the street, the word in the media, even Balkan Insight is talking about how she was paid and the others were paid hundreds of thousands of euros in special bonus payments to keep quiet, confidentiality, things like that. And then we've got the trial beginning on December 3rd, which is in just over, let's see. So we're recording this on Sunday, the 24th of November. It'll drop Monday, so a little over a week before that trial begins. What can you tell us about the hundreds of thousands of euros that she received?
Yeah, well, it's her own salary that's at stake now, and the salaries of the assistants, and how they were unlawfully giving themselves like these special bonuses for the very dangerous work they were doing. But even more, Vamora has been calling for an audit of the office from day one, because they would hire all these experts and public relations commentators, speakers, etc., who were part of the Colored Revolution. So they were literally using the not insignificant sum of money given to the office to fund people who would protest during the day and who would do social media battles during the day, and then at night would participate at pro-SDSM televisions, parroting the talking points of the opposition in what was supposed to be a non-partisan, unbiased prosecutorial outfit, which would prosecute the left and the right for alleged crimes in the wiretaps, and ended up prosecuting just the right. So it's the funding they siphoned to SDSM supporters, the money they gave to themselves, but also the very nature of the unit, because they were only persecuting people on the right for crazy, ludicrous cases. Again, the highway case, they couldn't find any money being changing hands, so they charged Nikola Gruevski with a quid pro quo, in which the quid or the quo was that he received a higher popularity rating for signing a reasonable deal to build a highway. So they couldn't prove he took any money for the Mercedes whose purchase he ordered and for which he had to flee to Hungary. Again, they couldn't prove that he got any money, so they said, well, but he got to be chauffeured around, and this is his quid pro quo, which is ludicrous to say that this constitutes corruption. So, their work from the start was corrupt and abuse of office and determining political outcomes in the country in not an unequal application of the law and using illegally obtained evidence. So it's rotten from the start, and it's it just gives you some kind of sense of karmic justice the way it's ending up. We're not sure. Somebody was transported from the prison to the shabby apartment her son has opposite the old office of the special prosecutor's office. This person was so wrapped up in a jacket with a hoodie on that we're not sure if it was Katica or if she was kept elsewhere. And then, while all the cameras were pointed at the prison, driven to the apartment, who knows? She was then pictured, a picture was taken of her in the apartment. Largely, we are largely certain that it's recent. It's not a dated one, although she's wearing short sleeves. So, yeah, but we should have another picture of her soon, or she should appear at the first hearing, as you said, in less than a week. And we've been calculating which is the closest friendly embassy around her, which is I'm betting on the Dutch embassy. She could easily make a run, or she can't really run.
No,
but
she can waddle. She can waddle.
Yeah.
She can't run. So
waddle to the embassy and ask for Julian Assange style asylum there. If she thinks that her negotiations with the government are not going well, she's obviously negotiating her release from detention in exchange for her keeping quiet, the sentence she would likely receive, and more importantly, the extent of the charges against her, which could be made lesser if she's cooperative. This is all negotiable. The third co-defendant, Zoki Kichet, has been also released, and his testimony is considered very important in the case, but we're yet to see which way it falls. While Boki 13, who is, arguably the sickest of the freemen, he has the best claim to being, mentally and physically. He's still in prison, yes. So apparently his negotiations are not going well. There was this huge fight between the prosecutor Vilma Ruskovska, who initially went very strong against Boki, and Janeva, then pulled back and did nothing for months, then reluctantly charged Janeva, and even more reluctantly charged one of the two SDSM officials who were involved in the racketeering, Frosina Remensky, who is also in house arrest. So now, everybody's very doubtful about whether Ruskovska's heart is in the case. She's very loyal to Zaev. This is internecine warfare between prosecutors close to Zaev. So on one hand, it might be honest. This is my sense, that they're honestly fighting each other because one faction of police people and prosecutors and judges couldn't stand watching another faction, also from the same party, taking all the extortion money, getting all the glory, etc., while they did just as much work to arrest Vemera people and bring Zaev to power. So they said, okay, listen, but we also want ours, or we would like to take your place. So this is one explanation. Another, which is now being advanced by Mitskovsky and Nushev people from Vemera, is that the judges and the prosecutors are feigning this argument over who released Katica Janeva and why. That the prosecutor Ruskovska is feigning that she's angry at Judge Nietzsche and others from the council, because that it's all agreed between them. It's all like a show in order to conceal the fact that Zaev is essentially, if anybody pulled the levers and got Janeva out of prison, it's Zaev. And to avoid having him blamed, we have this drama to shift the blame on the court. This is the explanation advanced by Vemera. I still think it's actually a serious fight between journalists, police people, judiciary people, all from SDSM, who feel that they're so strong now that they want to take all the spoils for themselves, and in the process are harming their own party.
Right. So what you're saying, basically, if I can sum it up, is there's no honor among thieves.
Oh no.
And they're all fighting each other for the spoils. And as you were going through that, Cvetin, two thoughts came to mind. Number one, so there's a fair amount going on in the media and on the streets and in the cafes, talk about this and these rackets and the fights amongst judges and within citizen, etc. But the group that we don't hear from, that is saying nothing about these scandals, or very little, is the group that helped put them all in power in the first place, and that is the transnational progressive elites, who engineered this so that Zaev could be in power, so that Yaneva could be the special prosecutor, etc. And that was one of their big things, was this insistence on the special prosecutor. And now, not a word. It used to be that the transnational progressive elites demanded that the special prosecutor's office, the law, be passed, and so that it could continue, etc. Now they're not even saying anything about that. So that's point number one. Point number two is that the longer this goes on, now we have this trial coming up, this constant media drip. We have elections coming up. The new prime minister, or the prime minister designate or temporal, or whatever you want to call him, Spasovsky, the current interior minister, is going to take over in early January. Actually, January 3rd, which is exactly 1 month from December 3rd when the trial begins. This is not good for just from a purely political standpoint, this is not good for citizen and for their prospects in terms of campaigning, when you've got this constant media drip of this scandal reminding the public of the fact that they came in and said they were going to clean up corruption, etc., and they're perhaps worse than any government before that. So I can't imagine why. Well, and maybe it is just an issue of they actually can't come to an agreement. As you said, there's this infighting going on, and they can't come to an agreement, so they're just going to continue fighting until one faction is stronger than the other and crushes it, etc. But that dooms them from an electoral standpoint, with the April 12 elections coming up. That dooms them, in my opinion.
Yeah, their domestic supporters, the colored revolutionaries, they were never like independents who were swayed or persuaded to to go out in the streets and fight corruption. They were all on the left, urbanites who, usually inclined toward this type of a party. And some of them, a good portion of them of the active ones, are now hired by the government. So they're keeping quiet, trying to do some damage control the best they can when Zaev says something stupid. Or Pendarovski is recently... Pendarovski is really taking the torch from Zaev. That's really...
You mean in terms of stupid statements?
Yeah, giving him a run for his money. And then there are some who haven't been engaged, like this small party which is being created from these disappointed colored revolution supporters, the Tvoya party around lawyer Alexander Tortovsky, who worked for Katica Yaneva and could have said something sooner. And they will run in the elections. They will steal some votes from SDSM, votes which SDSM is likely not to get anyway, because, some of these people are now, it's beneath them to campaign for SDSM. It's possible beneath them to even vote in the elections. SDSM saw a significant increase, not only in the Albanian vote, which was decisive in 2016 for them, but they also had a bump in turnout, which was seen as this independent, moderate, urbanite voters who were really persuaded by the colored revolution. Some of them were, as I said, since co-opted, some haven't. But there was a turnout of people who haven't voted before. Now I suppose these people would now find it beneath them to vote again. They might be persuaded to vote. They will say, well, I went out and voted for this Tvoya party, which carries the torch of the colored revolution. VMRO will have a claim to this as well, because they will likely have Gordana Siljanovska at some nice position in the Skopje electoral district, and Levica as well, the leftist protest party, will also have a similar claim. After the elections, it's very likely that Tvoya, if it has one or two members of parliament, they will go back to SDSM, so reduce their losses. Similarly, for some other right-wing nationalist parties which are now showing up, like the idiot Ljubcho Ristovsky, or what's his name. They might want to try and steal a few votes from VMRO, maybe have a member of parliament elected and then go to SDSM. So this is what's the deal with the colored revolutionaries. as for their foreign supporters, people who pushed Yaneva on us are now quiet on the social media. They're not discussing Macedonia.
Right.
Diplomats have disappeared, like Stevenson, Bailey. They are also out of the public eye. And nobody dares approach the U.S. ambassador and ask her, listen, this was your baby, this was your project. Journalists are afraid to go because some say, well, why refight the old battles? Many are, paid by USA directly or EU equivalents, so they don't want to rock the boat. They know which way their bread is buttered, and or as we say, they know they tie their donkey where the boss tells them to. This is our equivalent of the buttered bread, or actually Serbian equivalent, and which we use. So nobody has approached these people and asked them, listen, you came up with this idea. Didn't go so well, did it?
Yes.
They don't respond to this.
Yeah, well, talking about the U.S. Embassy and some of the other embassies, all of those former ambassadors have now left the building, and you have a whole new crop of ambassadors in there who are there, I think, in my opinion, just to kind of manage affairs and try and keep quiet, essentially, and just, keep their nose clean as much as they can. So they don't, whereas they may know, what happened in the past, and they may know where the dirty laundry is, etc., they're certainly not going to say anything. And they're diplomats, so they'll know enough. They're very good at avoiding the questions, avoiding answering the questions, etc. You mentioned David Stevenson. I put out a tweet the other day. It was a welfare check. I'm concerned. We haven't heard from him. Something, he could have fallen and broken his neck or something in a stairwell. And, people are concerned about where he is and what he's doing. And nobody seems to know. I think Jess Bailey, I think he's genuinely retired. I thought for sure, it's been over 6 months, maybe 8 months now. I thought for sure he would have joined a think tank or academia or something like that. He still might. We'll see.
They'll come here as some Soros representatives in the Balkans. The Open Society or something.
Talking about welfare checks, I think George Soros he is in bad health, and obviously his son Alexander is the one being groomed to take over. I think so. We'll see. Anyway, and we're going to have plenty of time in the coming months to talk about elections in Macedonia. We could even talk about elections in the U.S. because that's a constant thing.
It's the same story, the same way of removing the government and the same protest, the same use of judiciary for political goals, political gains.
Well, sure. We see this in the UK too with Brexit. So
yeah.
So it's everywhere where the transnational elites, and they're mostly progressive, but there are some on the right. But everywhere you see the transnational elites, their special project is being threatened. They're fighting back tooth and nail. But let's
letting go. Yeah.
No, you're right, absolutely, and they won't. So, let's speaking of some of those, let's segue over to Bulgaria and talk a little bit about Bulgaria. I see that's MEP, member of the European Parliament, Andrei Kovachev, who is, in the past, he's been a real ass. He said that the country will need to demand additional, guarantees if Vomero wins in the April elections, and I understand that the Vomero Tepamene leader Hristo Misovsky had an interview with or a conversation, I should say, with Borisov, the Prime Minister, and that made a bit of a splash. It didn't go well. Yeah, what was that all about?
Well, I mean, Borisov does this thing where he does a live Facebook 20 minutes interview with people wherever he goes at any conference. And he's really big into this. And he was having a meeting with Mickoski at the conservative EPP party conference in Zagreb, where they crazily elected Donald Tusk as party leader and Johannes Hannes deputy leader. So we are going full...
Take a quick pause there, real quick. Yes, that was I saw that, and I didn't dig into it, but Donald Tusk, however you pronounce his name, is the new president of the EPP.
Yeah.
This means the EPP is going to become a leftist organization.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry. So Borisov is doing his Facebook and friends.
Yeah, and Mitskovsky does the normal thing, which is like talk about the weather and the how was your trip stuff at the opening of the meeting. He knows that there are cameras around, but then I suppose at one point I'm guessing Borisov had a staffer hold a phone, but like pretend he's texting somebody, but actually recording and broadcasting, or something like a secretive way of recording the meeting. And Borisov out of the gate goes with substantive questions. Do you support the treaty with Bulgaria, under which we're supposed to say that all Macedonian heroes were Bulgarian, chunks of history were Bulgarian, and they don't insist that we say we're Bulgarians, but everybody else was Bulgarian before, so ergo it stands that we are now and always have been Bulgarians. And Mitskovsky says we will uphold every part of the treaty, which everything not part of the treaty, which is beneficial for both countries. And this is the moment where the video goes off. The staffer says, okay, we had enough, and cuts it short. And in half an hour, SDSM media outlets in Skopje are saying, look, Mitskovsky says he's opposed to the treaty, even though VMRO is generally favorable to the treaty, up to they would say like 80% of the treaty, unlike the one with Greece. They say we support 80% of this thing, but we stop short at the part where we have to declare ourselves Bulgarians. And anyway, the video goes off, and SDSM media jump and they say, look, we have this comment. Mitskovsky says one thing at home, another abroad, and obviously Mitskovsky comes out and says, no, this is what I said, this is what we always said, we will not accept that Koca Delchev and everybody else is declared Bulgarian, and that we are Bulgarians. And this response, Borisov and Kovachev, who was present at the meeting, who have endorsed Zaev to remain Prime Minister after the European Council. Borisov told him, stay, you have more work to do. Literally saying, I will never get somebody like you as Prime Minister of Macedonia to deliver these easy wins for me politically at home. To get somebody to punch around and get him to say like, well, yes, we were Bulgarians, Koca was Bulgarian, blah, blah, blah. And this is what Borisov gets out of this. He gets to be the tough guy at home in Bulgaria. And it's actually very damaging for our relations as peoples, as nations, because nobody in Macedonia can buy this. Nobody can say this, that this is a dignified behavior and a respectable, approach from Bulgaria. This is horrible. This is bullying, and Borisov does it for domestic purposes, for his own political gain at home. He would never he hasn't gone to Serbia and told them, okay, let's go through your history books and say all the times where you write that Bulgaria stabbed you in the back while you were fighting the Germans, the Austrians to the north. Okay, now you delete this or you don't get to join the EU. They never do this. Right. Because Serbia is larger and would reject this, etc. But they think they can get somebody in Macedonia to do this. In Zaev, they got one, and they are pushing this this story, which is actually actively making relations between Macedonians and Bulgarians much worse. Anytime they do this.
So, to sum up, you're saying that the bully Boyko Borisov of Bulgaria is a bastard.
Yeah.
So, and here he is. He's the EPP, which is up until the election of Tusk and Johannes Hahn, the center-right party within the European Union is actively supporting a socialist in Macedonia in the form of Zoran Zaev. So that's interesting. Well, yes. Well, I think we can say that all of these next door neighbor leaders, again the transnational progressive elites, etc., they all want Zoran Zaev to remain in power. They do not want to see VMRO come back into power because it will threaten as we were just talking about, this so-called treaty, friendship and good neighborly relations with Bulgaria. It will threaten the Prespa agreement. I was impressed to see, Miskolsky come out and basically say that, they're going to Vumero Dipamene, if elected and with the proper numbers in Parliament, will basically undo the Prespa, so-called Prespa agreement, one way or the other. And there's several ways that you can slice and dice this thing, and it just really depends on the numbers. But absolutely, of course, it has to be undone because it is dangerous. And Cvetin, here's a theme I'm going to start writing about more and talking about more, and that is this: any issue can be made and turned into a national security issue in any country, anywhere. And some are legitimate, some are not legitimate. So, when Obama was president here and he said climate change was a national security issue, it's not. Okay. Yeah. But the identity of the Macedonians is under attack. It has been under attack. We know it will be under attack from the Greeks, from the Bulgarians, from the Serbs, from the Albanians, from the transnational progressive elites, etc. If the Macedonian identity is weakened irreparably, that truly is a national security issue, because what that then does is it tells Macedonia's neighbors that they can come in and basically help themselves to Macedonian land.
Exactly.
And so that's a legitimate national security issue. So anything that strengthens Macedonian identity needs to be supported, which would include revoking Prespa and the Bulgarian treaty. Anything which damages or threatens Macedonian identity needs to be fought tooth and nail. So this is something I've been thinking a lot about it lately. I'd love to sit down with various Western ambassadors in Macedonia who would never want to sit down with me and talk about these issues on the record. I doubt they would. But it's something that I think we should start encouraging folks to have a conversation with. I'd love to see the think tankers at the various institutions within the EU that we like to talk about and poke fun at, and in the U.S., Atlantic Council and others, talk about these issues. I doubt they ever would, for whatever reason. So anyway, it's a slight rant there on Macedonian identity and national security issues, but I think it's a conversation worth having and having more often.
Yeah, it will force us to remind ourselves why we bothered declaring a nation state in the first place, because if we don't, the place is up for grabs, and it's going to be Sarajevo all over again. And it would be good to avoid this kind of outcome, but it's going to be impossible the way things are going. If these two treaties continue to stand, it's going to be impossible to avoid partition.
Right.
There is no point to a country of Albanians and Bulgarians standing as a separate state. I mean, what's the point of Macedonia if it's not the Macedonian state? It might There might be some point to Cyprus, because it's an island, to exist as a state, even though it's half Turkish, half Greek. But Macedonia is not an island. There is really very little point to it. And anytime Europe gets into an economic crisis, security gets wobbly as a result. The U.S. is, who knows where it stands and who runs U.S. foreign policy at this point. It's all very favorable to encourage all sorts of incursions in the region, and if we're not holding our own ground, then it can end up extremely badly. And we've been saying this since the start.
Right.
Do your part. There's a long war ahead, and we need you.
Are you ready for Marauder? Join the mobile infantry and see if you've got what it takes to be a citizen.
And welcome back to the Macedonian Content Farmers Podcast. This is Cvetin and we have, as always, Jason, Miko on the line. And we're at the end of this week's podcast. It's time for the Farmers Picks, where we try to present something nicer, more positive and uplifting from Macedonia. Jason,
Yes.
have you something prepared for us?
I do actually. I like to peruse the net looking for good news stories about Macedonia, and there are plenty of them out there. And a lot of them are blogs from travelers and whatnot. Here's another one. This one is, the title is 26 Unique Things to Do in Macedonia. And it actually says that, in Macedonia. And it's got a quick explanatory paragraph where it says about the name change and whatnot. But the rest of the blog talks nothing but about Macedonia. So 26 unique things to do in Macedonia. Of course, it starts, number one, visit Lake Ohrid. The second one is catch a performance at the ancient theater there in Ohrid. Visit the Bay of Bones. As I scroll down through here, visit they call it number 6, visit the Macedonian St. Tropas. Trpeța, of course, the lovely little fishing village there towards the end on your way down towards, why am I drawing a blank? Towards Cvetin and
Yes.
Doiran, of course, Skopje Fortress Kale, Bitola and Heraclea, Kokino, Kuklica Rock Formation. That's one that doesn't always make these. Matka Canyon, of course, Mechkin Common Monument, Memorial House of Mother Teresa. It's always important, I think, to remind folks that Mother Teresa was born in Skopje, daughter of Macedonia. Mavrovo National Park, Bitola, all kinds of things. So just one of those really nice, easy to read, lots of good pictures, blogs about the wonderful things to do and see and experience throughout Macedonia. So that's 26 unique things to do in Macedonia. That is my Farmer's Pick. Cvetin, what's yours?
It's Sunday evening, and this was the finals of the Junior Eurovision, the kids version of the Eurovision contest, and we had Mila Moskov representing Macedonia, and she actually did quite well. I watched her perform. She sang a song named Fire, part Macedonian, part English. It was pretty nice. Good visual effects, good action on the stage, and she ended up 6th. Poland were the hosts and they won the competition, and our girl was number 6. So I'll try to link the song at the end, unless YouTube blocks us again for this trespass. And it was a nice little catchy tune.
Well, great. I'll have to go and have a listen to that. Well, congratulations to her, and congratulations to Macedonia on a well-done recognition there. Well, good. Well, again, this is we're recording this on Sunday the 24th. Tomorrow it'll drop on the 25th. This is Thanksgiving week in the United States of America on Thursday, and so it's a bit of a slow week for Americans. This is our one truly national holiday where Americans of all faiths or no faith at all can come together on this Thursday with friends and family and just give thanks for the bounty that we have and all of the good things. You know, we live in a time, I think, on planet Earth this is the best time to be alive. You know, despite all of the problems out there, there is just so much good things and advances in technology, and infant mortality rates are down and lifespans are up, and despite all of the bad news, there is so much to be thankful for. And this podcast is us talking about mostly Macedonian things from a conservative standpoint, and I truly believe that the heart of conservatism is gratitude and being thankful for what you have, and being appreciative of the past and how we got here. And so this is Thanksgiving week. All of our listeners in the United States that celebrate Thanksgiving this week, a beautiful, wonderful, and safe Thanksgiving to you and yours. And I don't know if you're going to celebrate, since you spent some time in America, if you're going to celebrate Thanksgiving there, try and put a turkey in the smoker.
cold to smoke a turkey. And I actually haven't done that yet, but it sounds a bit challenging. So probably not, but I have some ribs and pork, but in
that
the
works
freezer
well,
I can crank them up. And yes, advice to our listeners: don't argue over politics on Thanksgiving.
No.
Save it for Twitter. That's what Twitter is for.
Great. Well, I'm glad we were able to catch up. We will do this again next week, and I hope you have a great week there, Cvetin.
Thank you. You too, buddy. Take care.
Take care.